There can be only one podcast, and may it be the Prince of the Universe. Hi, folks. I'm Matt.
Hi, wrestling fans. I'm Wes.
Hello, this
Hey.
is Heath speaking.
I'm so glad you're back.
Thank you. I enjoyed the last one, so thanks for having me back.
Just like wrestling has dark matches, we had a dark podcast just now with the mics turned off. That was just excellent.
Highly confidential.
So, Heath, you wanted to cover your love of pro wrestling magazines before we got into this?
You mentioned preferencing this, and I thought it was a great idea, so go ahead.
All right. Let me see if I can do this quickly for Wes, because he he is an a-hole sometimes. So anyway, most of this information I learned, and my love for the territories, obviously, came through the monthly wrestling magazines that used to come out. Some of them still do come out now, but obviously it's, you're down to basically one major territory and then another one in AEW, and then what else really matters. But back then you had multiple territories all around the country. The only way that you would know about those is if you read the magazine. So obviously the territories didn't cross-pollinize, which is a big word. Wes said I'm using big words.
I get sick from being all that cross-pollinizing here in Louisiana.
Yes. So anyway, so the only way to know what was going on in other regions of the United States was to read the magazines, because Stanley Weston was the creator of those. Obviously, Bill Apter, who all the marks know, and they call him the Apter Mags now. But he was just a photographer and a columnist. But so that's where I learned all the different ones: AWA, Portland, World Class out of Texas, Memphis, Georgia, Mid-South, Florida, WWF, AWA, list goes on and on. So anyway, that's how I learned all this stuff, and I always found it extremely exciting to see what was going on in other places.
What was the next major magazine you moved on to after wrestling magazines?
Probably Playboy.
I knew it. You were setting him up for that.
Well,
all right, so
I was already in Mad Magazine, but then I went on up.
Do
to
you
that.
feel like Playboy exposed the business to you?
Yes, but Hustler even more.
great. Good deal. All right, so speaking of 1982,
Yes, we're going to move into 1982 after that riveting paper callback.
You started it.
All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is probably the most, I would think, is the most globally known angle.
oh,
Jerry Lawler versus Andy Kaufman, which culminated in the Letterman appearance.
and I was just talking about this with someone too. That is pretty popular. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Andy Kaufman, huge wrestling fan, grew up in the Northern Territory, which was the WWF back then. He actually tried to sell this to Vince McMahon Sr., but of course, him being a more traditionalist, didn't kind of want to get the movie star TV people kind of into it. So,
Which is why Hogan left.
Yeah. So he got in touch with Jerry Jarrett down in the Memphis territory. So here we go again with Memphis. A lot of things have happened, definitely, that were memorable in Memphis. So it first started off with him coming down there, and the way he sold it to Jerry Jarrett, who was a promoter, was, hey, I really love wrestling. I really just want to come down there and do some angles and wrestle women. So he created a belt, which was the intergender champion, and
Very progressive.
yeah.
I'm wearing it right now.
Yes. And they were basically shoots, and what shoots means they were actually real fights to a certain extent. So they would call women into the ring, and he would get out there and say he could whip them. He actually did promos beforehand, so and so and so, and then him and Lawler get on Letterman together, and things change. One of the biggest angles of all time. Obviously, Letterman was still early in his late night show, this being 82. But Kaufman starts berating Lawler on there, and Lawler gets up and not rehearsed, but Kaufman went with it, being the consummate pro, and Lawler slapped the hell out of him, knocked him out of his chair. The crowd's silent. Letterman doesn't know what the heck's going on.
They go dark.
Yeah. Kaufman goes off. Lawler's still out there. Letterman's still going, kind of doesn't know. And then all of a sudden, Kaufman comes out from the side and he just starts cussing.
Yeah.
And, right in front of Letterman and everything on live TV.
Doesn't he throw water on him?
Yeah. At the end of it.
Yeah.
I will sue you, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So, obviously that made the papers, and here we go. And then he started a whole program with Lawler.
Well, the program had been going. I think that was the end of it.
No, there was more after that.
Oh, okay.
So that started a whole nother thing. I mean, this program went on over a year, on and off. So there went to a thing to where, Lawler pile drove him a few times, and Kaufman, being the pro, he kept selling in the ring. And, Lawler's like, get up. He's like, no, I'm selling it. Get an ambulance here. And
Wow.
He's like, we ain't got time for that. He's like, I'm not moving till you get an ambulance. So he was selling all the way. So he wore like the neck brace and all that. And it just went on and on and on. And, Jimmy Hart's first family was part of that as well. They kept swerving Lawler back and forth. And, once it was over with, obviously Lawler won. And what wasn't known at the time was, like, one of the last matches they had together was when Andy Kaufman was diagnosed with cancer, and he didn't let like Jimmy Hart didn't even know, and knew that he was kind of he kept saying he just had this bad cough and stuff like that. And then the program ends, and then really not too long after that Kaufman died. So
what if it was not cancer, it was corona? Would that have been the ultimate work?
Long gestation period, yes.
What?
Yeah. Anyway.
Thermos? Yeah, go ahead. What's the next one?
I'm stuck on gestation. The next thing we had was Vince officially buys the WWF from his father.
Yeah, so not a lot of people knew about this. Vince Sr., and I think he had 4 or 5 partners, one of them being Gorilla Monsoon, which a lot of people would know. Basically, I believe, if I remember correctly, Vince bought out his father and the others for $1 million or $2 million. I can't. It's one or the other. But anyway, he had to pay them in increments, and if he defaulted on any, the catch was that it would all revert back to them. He never did default, but he was kept as nobody knew that until the next couple of years, when obviously he tried his expansion stuff. So big deal.
Big gamble that paid off for him, because he knew that was the only way that his father was going to agree to that deal, huh?
Yes, because I don't think he would have done it unless he had the partners, and he obviously wanted to make sure that they were going to get their money.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, he wasn't hurting for money, but
Wasn't that Capital City
Partners.
Wrestling?
Capital City Wrestling, yeah.
There you go.
That was Vince Sr.'s corporation. Yeah, so they kept that under wraps, and, I think Vince Sr. kind of knew what his son wanted to do.
He knew. He didn't kind of know. Come on now.
Well, I was kayfabing a little bit.
Why are you This is
Okay, he knew, folks. He knew.
All right.
So,
Okay.
but, nobody saw what was coming in the next 2 years.
Wow.
Yep.
Interesting. All right.
Don't kayfabe these 69 people listening to this.
Sorry, y'all.
All right, next thing we have is another one of Heath Fudge's heartthrobs. Ted DiBiase turns on the JYD.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the Mid-South Territory, where we're at now in Louisiana, the Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas area, nobody was bigger. And I would almost say that there wasn't hardly a babyface bigger at the time other, than JYD, the Junkyard Dog. You could put Dusty Rhodes in there for sure, but JYD was as over. They called him the King of New Orleans for a reason. He sold a lot of tickets. So him and DiBiase were both baby faces at the time. JYD had just won the North American belt from Bob Roop. Look that one up. And a week later, a nice little friendly match, friend against friend, JYD versus Ted DiBiase. And beforehand on this, they were really running short on heels to go against the dog because he was just running through everybody. Ernie Ladd was one of the bookers at the time, the big cat Ernie Ladd. He's from around the Louisiana area. Ted DiBiase walks into his office one day and says, "Hey, I found your new heel." And Ernie goes, "Oh yeah, well who is it?" And Ted goes, "Me." And all of a sudden, Ernie's eyes lit up, and he knew that there was money in that. So,
Wow.
Ted was a consummate man's wrestler. He was groomed at one time to, be NWA champion. He didn't get it, but he was up there. He was highly regarded. So in the match for the North American belt, they're having their nice little match, and they bump heads. DiBiase falls out of the ring. JYD helps him back in, and while he's getting back in the ring, Ted DiBiase loads up the glove with a foreign object, and as soon as Dog gets in the ring, he hits him one time, knocks him out cold, wins the belt. The entire place is shocked, like nobody knows what's going on.
Heath, what did Ted do that gave you such an angle alert that made the crowd get so hot?
When DiBiase would load his glove, he would always raise his hand up to show everybody in the camera and everybody in the arena that he was loading the glove, except the announcers knew it. JYD never knew it. The ref never knew it. Everybody else is going crazy, knew what they did, and there was nothing that anybody could do about it.
Wow.
So that led to, that was about as big as it could be. Junkyard Dog was Teddy's best man in his wedding. True story. So that angle was used as part of that. So the sympathy on that played a lot of part in that. And you didn't go against the dog. And there he got death threats. He got his tire slashed. He had to hide in the back of trunks to get into arenas. It was that big of a deal.
Yeah. I think Jim Ross even said if he could have a stable of 10 people start his own program on Ted DiBiase.
He just wouldn't let Ted do the books.
Well, probably not.
That's a good one. Yes.
I know the listeners know this. I've said it, but I don't know if he's heard it. The missus has hung out. She was friends with Ted DiBiase Jr. in college.
Really?
And she got to go to the $1 Million Man's house, see the belt.
In Clinton?
Yes.
Okay.
See it at Mississippi College, right there in Clinton.
Right.
So she got to see all his pictures with Hogan, with all the, he has pictures, of course, with everyone. And she was just like, she was a big wrestling fan. So it was like nice to, he was never around.
Yeah.
But when Ted Jr. was there, but then when I sent her the latest news with Ted Jr. not so good, she sent me a text back, "I'm not surprised."
I was lucky enough to meet him at a con once and hold the $1 Million belt.
There you go.
Prior to that, I had a friend go to a con that I missed, and he was there, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Ted DiBiase's here. Do you want me to get his autograph for you?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Put him on will he get on the phone?" And he was like, "I don't know, I'll ask." Ted got on the phone and we actually had a conversation, and it was amazing. Obviously, I popped like a little kid.
Wow.
I actually brought up the glove he used to wear, which we just talked about right then. And I actually said, "Do you remember that you used to call the glove Maggie in your interviews?" And he stopped and he was like, "Whoa." He was like, "I totally forgot about that. You're absolutely right." And of course, I popped even harder because I stunk. Stop it. That I made Ted DiBiase remember something. So fanboy.
No, that's good.
Total fanboy came out.
No, I know that. Yeah. I've had those, but those are cool moments when
Yeah.
you're talking to someone and they dig it and they start returning back and everything. Yeah.
Back in the 90s, I was lucky to see JYD before he passed. I met him at a indie show backstage. So, yeah.
What's the? I'm sorry to pause here. I know we got one more on 82. Mm-hmm. What's the geekiest wrestler you've ever just kind of gone bonkers for?
Skandor Akbar. He is a manager for Mid-South, and Wes will love this one because the demigod that he worships name's Flip. He actually he's a good friend of mine as well. He actually didn't let me know at this indie show that Akbar was there, so he took me backstage and
Oh, it was a big reveal.
opened the door, and I walked in, and Akbar turned around, and let's see, I was probably 25, 26 at the time. My mouth dropped. I mean, it was, just
Were you
to see,
squealing like a teenager at a Taylor Swift concert? I mean,
I couldn't talk. All I could do was smile. I mean, I was literally starstruck.
Wow.
I was starstruck because as a wrestling fan from Mid-South and UWF, that for
Yeah.
me. And he turned around and he said my name and he shook my hand and we talked, and they took a picture of it that I didn't even know they did. They got him to actually cut a promo that they recorded prior.
Shut up.
And they gave that to me for Christmas and surprised me. And I put the CD in, and all of a sudden here's Akbar's promo, and he's cutting it on me. And of course, I popped again. And so I mean, I still have that CD to this day.
Cut that in
I was
post.
gonna ask.
I have the picture to this
Do you
day.
still-
That to me was
Now that's a treasure moment. I get that.
that was the one I geeked out most on. for sure.
I bet you melted when you heard that CD for the first time and heard him popping on you.
When
there.
he said my name and then cut a promo.
Didn't he
about-
call you a dirty hippie?
He called me, you dirty, greasy hippie. You must have went to school in Monroe.
Wow.
And because that was always
You
a
got to
lot-
give out a little girly scream when you hear that, like,
Yeah. That was a promo that I told Flip about a long time ago that a friend of mine had heard him say in one of the Monroe promos advertising a show about Jim Duggan.
wow.
And I was like, when he cut it on me and said my name, I was like, yeah, this is it.
I peaked.
Yes.
That's a great story.
It is.
All right, go ahead. Next one. I'm
Well,
sorry.
I think the biggest takeaway from that is how important Flip is, because he set that up, and that's why I'm so in worship of Flip to this day.
Wes is glistening right now.
Yeah, like a Shipley's donut at 5 a.m.
1982.
1982.
All right, last but not least, Christmas night, Dallas, Texas. Flair versus Kerry Von Erich, the infamous cage match with Michael Hayes as a guest referee. He tries to set up Kerry for the win. Kerry will not accept the win in anything but a clean victory. Michael gets mad, leaves the ring, gets shoved in the back by Flair. He thinks it's Kerry. Terry Gordy, his other favorite, slams the cage into his head and jump starts the biggest thing to ever hit Dallas, Texas.
You were talking about the Von Erichs versus the Freebirds. That was a 2-year program that rocked Dallas, Texas, and is probably considered one of the biggest feuds of all time. There was
Wow.
nothing more violent, more personal. They tore the house down wherever they went. You had three brothers that were all good looking, all great wrestlers, and could shut down a Six Flags at a autograph signing. Like literally shut down.
I remember the Dark Side of the Ring did an
Yes.
episode on them, and they were like royalty.
They
in
were
Texas.
the Beatles in Texas.
Yeah.
They were that big. They were that over. And when you had the Freebirds come in and do dastardly things to the Von Erich boys, you might as well have spit on the Pope or whatever else. They were the most dastardly heels of all time. And they ran with that for, like I said, 2 years on and
Wow.
off.
Wow.
Huge. Money.
Money.
It actually popped world class to the point to where everybody wanted to wrestle there. So anybody that was anybody came there after that, and world class for a while was probably the biggest promotion going.
Awesome.
They also had cover. They had satellite coverage. They were on a big superstation out of Dallas, so they were seen as far as Israel, if you want to believe that. Yeah, huge numbers.
Huge. All right. Cool. 1983.
So we're going to start in 1983. This is going to be our biggest year of what we felt led up to the boom, because everything was really, all of the exits were getting onto this one giant interstate that was heading to New York.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with Snuka versus Morocco, the infamous cage match where Snuka leaps off the top of the cage, which had many Hall of Famers in the audience, including Mick Foley and Bubba Ray Dudley.
Sandman.
Not a Hall of Famer.
Right. Tommy Dreamer, for all you ECW people, they're Hall of Famers in their own minds.
You say that with such kind of malice in your voice.
They're okay. But, I mean, they're known. They're known to all the marks
Sounds like
now.
a Southern bias.
No, well, just saying. Just saying.
I liked ECW for what it was back in the day. There you go. Anyway, Snuka Morocco. So, not the first time that Snuka tried to jump off the top of the cage. Actually, the year before, he was a heel working a program against WWF champion Bob Backlund. They had a world title match in a cage. He actually went to the top of the cage, flew off of it. Backlund moved, and then he crawled out of the cage and won. So, not the first, but obviously this is the one the most memorable. Actually, he did lose the match to Morocco. Morocco gets out of the cage. Snuka, irate that he lost, drags Morocco back into the cage, beats him up, goes to the top of the cage. That's all over YouTube. That is probably one of the most iconic moments in wrestling history. That itself also was on CBS that I talked about in the prior episode.
Heath loves CBS.
I was a CBS News guy.
Hey, there you go.
Even in elementary school. Anyway.
No, it's nice to know those things made the news back then. News circuits,
national stuff. So
I agree.
he comes off on him. That didn't sound good. Excuse me. He came off the cage and connected, and of course the place popped. That might have to be edited. Thank you. But anyway, yeah, super memorable, and I think I just made it more memorable.
Yeah, he did.
And he did throw the belt on Morocco and walked out. That was
That's
how he
nice.
just threw it down in disgust.
And the
you
crowd
go.
popped when he came.
Yeah, I mean Mick Foley.
Off the top of the cage.
Yes. I mean,
Off the top of the cage.
Right.
Got it.
I mean, just for the fact that Mick Foley said that was probably one of the things that made him more of a fan and want to get into wrestling more than anything.
Oh, really?
I mean,
That's his defining match to get him to say, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, because
Wow.
if you really look at it, I mean, that's setting up Hell in the Cell fall.
That's
against
true.
The Undertaker.
That's true.
That was his Snuka moment, I guess you could say. So
Nice.
there you go.
All right, next one.
The debut of the Road Warriors, who were put together by Ole Anderson.
Yep. So you had two big old muscle heads that were from the Minneapolis area working nightclubs as bouncers and stuff. And Ole sees them, puts them together, brings them down to the Georgia territory. Paul Ellering is their manager. Precious Paul, who had to retire from wrestling, became a great manager. Put them in there basically as world beaters. They just plowed through everybody. Nobody had ever seen anything like them. I mean, they were massive.
It's a credit to Ole and how he could see talent and how you can market it, because a million things could have gone wrong for something like that. But
Yeah, because when they first started, I mean, they were super, super green. All they knew how to do was beat up people.
Yeah,
and
stiff.
they were stiff.
Yeah.
Very stiff. But they got over tag team of the year for like 3 or 4 years in a row after that.
Wow.
So the Road Warriors, that's people still remember them to this day.
Yeah, no, you're right. Go for it.
Yeah, definitely changed the way of. There was no back and forth in their matches.
No.
The only back and forth was them shooting somebody into the ropes and hoping to God they didn't get their neck broken. That was the fourth.
Yeah.
True.
Next is a pretty big thing as far as a business-wise. Southwest Championship Wrestling is canceled by the USA Network, and the WWF takes that spot, which obviously they would carry until the early 2000s when they went to TNN for a cup of coffee. But Southwest losing that spot was huge. Southwest was owned by Tully Blanchard's father, Joe Blanchard, and was a major territory as well that we haven't talked about, that also had Gino Hernandez in it, who was also covered on Dark Side of the Ring.
Yes, I remember that.
Gino Hernandez, one of the what-ifs in wrestling. He had it all. He was brash. He was cocky. He had the look. He had the style. He would have been a major player in the 90s.
Come the boom.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
You were telling me about that because
yeah.
I didn't know anything about him. We talked about that episode, and Wes educated me a little bit on it because I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, so the Dallas office really consisted of most of Texas, and Joe kind of branched out and took Southwest onto his own, which was out of San Antonio area. Paul Bosch had Houston, Fritz Von Erich had the Dallas area, Joe Blanchard had the San Antonio area. So small promotion, yet they got the cable coverage, which was big. Unfortunately, it got to the point to where
They went broke by paying wrestlers, what Tully said.
that and the fees of running, having to pay USA to stay on it, they just couldn't handle it. So all of a
Right.
sudden,
No.
Vince scooped it up, and there you go.
Yeah, rest is history.
Yep.
Literally.
Huge, big thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Next up is Vince McMahon, pronouns, withdraws as the territory member of the NWA.
Right.
Yeah, so the NWA was the governing body of all wrestling in the United States.
You don't say no to them.
No. The way that they kept from being considered a monopoly by the government was that you had two other territories. You had the AWA,
Mm-hmm.
the American Wrestling Association, and you had the WWF, World Wrestling Federation. Silently still members of the NWA, but made it to look like they were separate.
Competition, yeah.
So they wouldn't be considered a monopoly,
Wow.
which the NWA was. It was mafia-like.
Right.
You didn't, you didn't cross territories. You didn't.
You followed, you stayed in your lane.
You stayed in your lane. You didn't screw another promoter over.
Kept your head down, followed the rules.
Yep. And as long as nobody invaded your territories, it was fine, and everybody. You had people that would go from territory to territory because that was how people learned, and that's how people honed their craft and stuff like that. Somebody would be old in one territory, they would go to another one, and they'd be
get a fresh new start again.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah.
So anyway, we had already said that Vince Jr. had bought the group from his dad in '82. So now all of a sudden he withdraws. Now he's starting to ruffle feathers. Now you got the other promoters in the.
This is the first time he pees in the Cheerios.
Yes, and that's where things start getting a little iggy, and
Pop.
Yeah, so he's starting to really piss some people off, if you want to say.
Yeah,
so there you
and this
go.
is covered in the Dark Side of the Ring, I think, for Vince. I think too.
Yeah, there's a lot of this is sex, drugs, and headlocks. I think a lot of this is covered in too.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next thing is, and Heath will have to give us a little bit of dialogue over this, the last battle of Atlanta, which was highlighted by Wildfire Tommy Rich against the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer in a vicious cage match.
Vicious.
So back to the Georgia territory, obviously. Yeah, obviously. They got a lot of coverage in the wrestling magazines. This was a huge feud. Wildfire Tommy Rich, the ultimate babyface, against Buzz Sawyer. They just beat the heck out of each other, like just for months and months, and until finally it culminated with the last Battle of Atlanta, which was a steel cage match. But it was also the first cage match, and correct me if I'm wrong, had the top on it. The first one that ever been out there. So historians could say that kind of led to Dusty seeing how he wanted to have the War Games match. So if you go back and look at War Games that happened in later years, and then also kind of a precursor to Hell in a Cell in a way. So I've heard numerous wrestlers talk about that was kind of the thought process with seeing this one. This one also is it's out on the WWE Network or the Peacock now. It's probably out on YouTube as well. It's a silent video that's out there. There's no commentary, unfortunately, but
Heath can do commentary for you. He has an OnlyFans page.
yes, thank you. So anyway,
He says a lot though.
That's right.
yes. So when you see the when you see the cover of the wrestling magazines and you see how bloody and vicious this was, Paul Ellering was Buzz Sawyer's manager. He was hanging from a cage, so he couldn't interfere, and Ole Anderson was around to make sure that didn't happen as well. Huge blow off on that. Some say that neither one of them's careers were ever the same after that, but it was a big one.
So Heath, in your opinion, who looked better in BVDs, you or Tommy Rich?
Man,
Because Tommy Rich's tights look more like a giant diaper.
he did like to wear white a lot, didn't he?
Hey,
Somebody say something about BVDs. I'm not gonna toot my own horn, toot, but
No, you wouldn't want to.
yeah, I'm gonna say Wildfire carried it. I mean, that hog got used more than mine.
Hey, you know what? That's a good place to pause right here. Folks, we're going to be back up with 1983. He's going to come back. This is good stuff. Thanks for being on here. I really appreciate this. You're breaking records. I won't even tell you what time it is, but you're breaking records right now. I'm proud of you.
Hey, I'm not even sleepy, y'all.
Oh!
somebody say something
All
about
right.
caffeine.
Just like, what's her name on USA Up All Night? Rhonda
Shear.
Rhonda Shear. You're going to be up all night, right?
All night long.
We'll see you next time on Princes of the Universe.